games are made in a lot of different ways. So there's not one process. So some games, like these AAA titles, are made because you've got a team of, 200 people and $100 million budget in 5 years.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, viewers from wherever you're watching us from. We are at Osoita Lodge. Physically, we're not. But this video has been powered by Osoita Lodge, indeed, where guests become family. And it's a great honor today that we have an amazing guest. All the way from the USA. He'll tell us which part of the USA he's from as he introduces himself. And it's a great honor to have you, Skaff.
Hello. My name is Skaff Elias. I currently live in the Seattle area in the state of Washington in the U.S. I grew up in Pennsylvania, though. Okay. And it's awesome to be here.
Yeah.
So I really love Kenya, and it's my second time here. Mm-hmm. And I'll probably be back next year.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to have you back next year. And definitely, viewers, today we are going to talk about a lot of stuff regarding sports development, regarding sports business, just to reflect on how much sport has developed over the years in terms of even getting into esports. And sit back, relax, and enjoy as we do this. And even as we do this, engage us in the comment section. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss a thing as we bring you some of the great interviews that are life-changing in the sports world. So just to kick us off, Skaff, what do you do?
Currently, I'm a game designer. And I also do consulting for other companies that are making games.
Mm-hmm. So you mean esports games or?
All sorts of games. Not only electronic games, but also card and board games. Okay. I have a business. My partner is Richard Garfield, the guy who invented trading card games. And so we go around helping companies. I mean, we don't publish games ourselves, but we help other companies or design games for other companies to publish.
Yes, definitely. If you're watching us and you'd like to get into that realm of designing games, creating games, and Africa, we still have lots of games to create within our own cultural ways and within our own sporting world and sporting industry right here in Kenya. I'd like to see the Shujaas play rugby and in a video game. So come up, take up the challenge, and get in touch with us and help. We can help you get to do that, definitely. And just to kick us off as we continue also, you played basketball?
The first time I ever played basketball was I was a senior in university. Mm-hmm. So my fourth year in university. Before then, I hadn't really played when I was a kid at all. Mm-hmm. So I was very late to start playing basketball, and I love it. It's still like basically my favorite thing to do. I'm older now, and my knees are gone, and I still like to play, even though it's very painful.
Okay. And where did this passion of sports start growing up? What were the foundational years for you in regards to sports, family?
Yeah, that's a great question. My family was very much into sports, and my father played football in college. He got a scholarship to play, and he was on a nationally ranked American football team. Sorry, American football, not football. And my entire, my whole mother's side of the family is excellent athletes. One of them played professional NFL football and was very good at that. And there have been professional golfers and beach volleyball players in the family. And so, yeah, a deep. And when I was growing up, I was more like a nerd, and I couldn't do any of those things. I was awful. My hand-eye coordination, I had bad eyes. When I was younger, my knees were bad. So I was always like the black sheep, because I couldn't compete with all my cousins in all the sports that they did. Yeah. So I did have a deep respect for sports, though. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I was able to play, I played.
Yeah. So growing up in that array of family, sports athletes, sports people, what has sports done to your family in terms of socialization and other aspects of life, getting to be able to relate, to express yourself or express themselves?
Yes.
What has sports changed or done in your family?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. So for them, a lot of the, like, when they were growing up, a lot of their friends also played sport, and it helped them because it provided a way for them to make friends. It provided a way for them to compete. It provided a way for them to get sort of respect from their community as they did better. And I think it also did something else interesting. So, like, when you watch sports, most people watch, they don't play.
Yeah.
So when you watch sports, it also helps you socialize. Sometimes, you might have a grandfather or an uncle that you only meet once a year, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's not always easy to talk to people across generations. But when you sit down and you're watching sports together, then that provides something for you to talk about, to start the conversation, a point of commonality. And sports are very interesting because they provide a common point, not just for, let's say, oh, we're all playing on a football team together in school. That's easy. But it's also, oh, my next generation of my family, or some cousins I rarely met. But it's more than that, because it's everybody in your city, and it's everyone in your continent, and except for North America, it's everybody in the world. So it's pretty interesting how it lets us all share this experience.
So you mentioned you grew up as a nerd, and not so active, actively engaging in sports, but at some point of your life you started engaging in sports.
Yeah.
Finished the physical engagement, you got into now the e-engagement.
Right.
At what point in your life did you get to link all this up and make sense out of it?
Right. Where they really started to link up was when I was working. As I mentioned, my partner, Richard Garfield, had invented trading card games. And so I was very early on in that. In graduate school together is when he first introduced it to me. I was the third person in the world ever to play Magic the Gathering. For those of you that know what Magic the Gathering is, Richard had played with one of our other friends, Barry, first, and then basically I was in the next gaming session with Richard. So for years I worked on that game, and we developed it. Originally it was, the audience for that was math and physics graduate students. And so it was, it was fairly intellectually intense, and a lot of the people that worked on that game played bridge at a highly competitive level, played chess, played poker at a competitive level. And so as Magic grew and developed, eventually, of course, little younger kids started playing because their minds are fast and easily adaptable. And the game had a lot of depth to it. So we actually had a lot of statistical information that there were many, many, many levels of skill. And not only that, but you could play it for years and years and years and never achieve, which is like any sport or chess or, all of these things that have been, traditionally accepted as, say, worthy of respect in society. Now, some societies respect intellectual sport. Not many, but Russia's like the best example with how much they respect their chess champions. And that led to, an interesting thing there, where it was very respectable to be what we would call a nerd and play chess, and you could actually get respect from the rest of your society. And then that's about it, right? Especially for games in North America, and double especially for games that were new games, what we call proprietary games that are invented and published, as opposed to old historical games. There was really no respect for people that put time into that. And I don't know. I had always felt as a little kid kind of disrespected because I couldn't play the sports. And so I felt that like if someone is really pushing themselves, in this case your mind more than your body, but someone is really pushing themselves hard in this competitive environment where you can study and practice for years and get better and better, that should be worthy of respect, developing one's mind. So we called them intellectual sports, basically. Obviously, chess would have been the first one. And so we were struggling for ways to essentially to reward the player for the effort that they were putting in. So we created a tournament structure for Magic, which is sort of, there had been earlier attempts, but it was the first like really solid attempt to make a sport out of a game, what you would call a game. And so we put millions of dollars in prize money and scholarship money on it. We had a tournament structure that stretched across the entire world. We were running 2,000 tournaments each week by the time I left the company in the early 2000s. I don't know where the numbers are now. Which is, 2,000 tournaments a week is a lot. It's a lot. And so it's interesting, and then it was successful. We got stars, we got consistent stars, and people were able to get respect through playing. Because at least in North America, the easiest way to make something respectable is to put money on it and have a big competition. So that's how I got into this whole thing. And then it wasn't just, we didn't just do it off the cuff. We did a lot of research, like intensive research on what other sports did, especially individual sports. So like tennis and golf and things like that. And we talked to a lot of people that have been influential in those sports in the 60s and the 70s and did research on them. And we talked to hired consultants at professional sports management agencies, people that were very high up in Major League Baseball, people that were high up in tennis, and then of course chess also was an example. And then we just studied that as much as we could to help us design the way we wanted our tournament system to run.
Nice. So having that all really great sports foundation that led you to do all the creating of developing Magic and the tournament to 2,000 people per week.
No, not 2,000 people per week. 2,000 tournaments per
2,000 tournaments per week. 2,000 tournaments per week. So what was it like going through the process? You said research is key.
Yes.
Research is key. So research is always key for any sports development, right?
Yes, I think so. So many people think that just because they're smart, they can just create things. And they can, but a lot of that work has already been done over the years, over the centuries, really, for some of these things. And so you want to steal from other people as much as you can. You want to use these ideas so that you can build on top of this layer, right? And so it's a lot of legwork.
Okay. So you did all that, and what experience have you got or seen in the development of sports in general over the years to date, and what are some of the projections that you see of what is the next future of sports in the world generally?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that. So I can only take guesses. It's a very complex situation, and it's really hard to decide. I think there's some interesting things that have happened in the last 20 years. If you go back a little bit further, across the last 40 years, sports did tend to change a lot because of, in the United States anyway, cable. So people, instead of there being 3 channels you could possibly watch on your television, all of a sudden there were 80 channels or 100 channels. So that was a really big change in the way sports worked. So there were some sports that, because there was so little time to put stuff on television, so being there in person was much more important. So a game like baseball, which is very friendly because it had a zillion games and they were all over, and it was easy to watch in person. That probably then suffered relative to other things where, like the NBA, where you could start watching these games much easier on your television. And that sort of thing expanded more and more through more and more channels being available to people, and satellite TV and everything. And so that did change the way sports worked a little bit. It's even interesting, sports, like one of the most interesting things for American football is, and I don't think they do this in football, soccer, football, but they have this instant replay. I'm assuming they don't do that in.
They do that in the Euro leagues.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, English Premier Leagues and. But not
right. So this is a great example. Okay, so not here, but so in the Euro leagues, and then so American football or European football. So the interesting thing about instant replay is, if you think about the rules of soccer, I'll just use the word soccer so we don't get it confused with American football. I apologize to everyone in Kenya for doing that. Anyway, so so no matter what type of football you're playing, it's interesting because instant replay is actually part of the official rules of these leagues, right? But it's no part of the original rules of soccer. Doesn't even make any sense, or football doesn't even make any sense. And a lot of coaches and players hate it. But the leagues were smart enough to understand that when you have all these television cameras, the people at home are seeing something different than the people on the field are playing. And so it is important to respect the fans, because the game is almost not the game on the field. It's really, in a lot of ways, the game on your screen. Now, the coaches and the players most of them don't necessarily believe that, but that's why they're getting so much money, right? I mean, you're not going to get paid $20 or $40 million a year or whatever if you don't have television. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get paid like people did back in the 1960s. So what it means to be the game has changed. So if it's your viewership, and that is an important aspect of what's happening, and again, we're talking about socializing and entertainment and all this sort of stuff, then the rules have actually changed to support the fact that the game's not what's happening on the field. It's critical to understand the viewership. And so the leagues, as much as people tend to hate instant replay, it is like almost a necessary step for the way sports have evolved. Now, of course, that was in the U.S. That happened 20 years ago. I don't know when the Euro leagues started their instant replay. It probably wasn't. Sometime in the very recent history. So that's kind of how sports have moved, which is more and more about this social experience, and more about this viewership, and so a lot of rules changes have occurred in baseball in the United States. They're trying to speed it up. People's time that they have to spend on stuff in today's society, everything's quick. And so some of the more forward-looking sports leagues have really embraced the idea of people posting clips on YouTube, and it's more, or on Twitter, you'll see the sports stars are interacting directly with the fans, and so that's kind of the way sports are moving. And so what is that? It's very interesting. So I know I haven't even begun to answer your question yet about what I see as the future. But I think that the sports that are going to succeed are going to tend to be the ones that are the best adapted to the way media works today. So
If you'd repeat that again.
So I think the sports that are going to succeed going forward are the ones that are best adapted to the way media is going to work in the future. Today, we have YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and whatever. I don't know what the next thing in media will be. Although I'm skeptical, maybe this metaverse stuff and 3D and whatever. I'm a skeptic, but I'm also old. But in any case, whatever it's going to be in the future, the sports that are best adapted to it, not just in two ways. One is policy. Like, do you let your fans post a clip? It used to be you couldn't do that, and they would make people take them down. And that was very short-sighted, I think. And now it's more and more open. For two reasons. One, it's hard to police. And two, they understand now that that's the way people are consuming the sports. And the second thing is, again, it's very interesting. So what makes the experience good for a non-player? So it's very, I think, harmful to certain sports, like, I know baseball is a pretty good example, or cricket. They're very popular sports around the world, but if you don't understand them and you don't grow up playing them, when you watch it on the screen, it's kind of objectively, like if someone's never seen it before, it's like, I don't really even understand if what they're doing is interesting or not. It is interesting, and the more you watch these things, the more you like them, and there's so much depth in them. And I think that so you have two different ways in the modern world of what makes basketball so good is when you see some of the things people do. If you've never played basketball before, you're like, you can just viscerally understand that that's amazing. Probably the similar with boxing, with American football. I can tell you that I have eventually come to enjoy football, soccer, but it took a while. And the reason is because I didn't play. And so it was harder for me to appreciate what was happening. So the strength of American football is that almost no one plays it. Like, even the vast majority of people that watch American football have never played American football, because you have the entire audience of women generally don't play it in high school, and very few people play at high school. And it doesn't matter, because it's like, I don't know, if I was watching an ancient Roman gladiatorial combat, I don't have to be a gladiator to be excited about what I'm seeing, right? And so football has that going for it. The amazing thing that football has going for it is a lot of people have played football, right? Because it's easy to play, especially as a kid. It doesn't require the equipment that American football does. So they're approaching it in a much different way than American football does. American football is all based upon, anyone can understand. Usually, you don't even have to know the rules of the game, and some interesting things are happening there with the hard hits. And then soccer football is interesting for so many viewers because they have played it. And so they get over that. There are some interesting things that happen in football that everyone can appreciate, but more than that, the knowledge of how to play is much broader. So anyway, those sorts of things will succeed. If for some reason, like football, similar to, say, baseball in America, if for some reason people stop playing at the lower levels, it would really hurt it at the top. And I think that's different for basketball. I think basketball is so automatically visually exciting, even if you haven't ever played before, just because dunking and jumping high is kind of, everyone understands that.
And the long shots.
And the long shots, yeah. And so I think some of the sports are less reliant on people playing it at one point in their lives. So anyway, so what's going to happen going forward? Sports that have the ability to a tiny little Twitter 5-second clip, or how well they're going to be adapted to YouTube. I think that's going to 50 years from now, that's going to change the landscape of the types of things we're watching.
if you know, just hearing all that and looking at our country, you know, I think for Kenya we don't have much of our Kenyan sports on TV,
Yeah.
or most of our African sports on TV. But I think if I can speak for Kenya, I don't have the right data or statistics, but I think most people are on smartphones.
Yes.
And just as you said, as things are changing,
Yeah.
the only sports or the only sports disciplines that are going to adjust and be successful in the current times are those that are adjusting to how the media is changing.
Yeah.
And the short clips on social media,
Yeah.
the what, and all these things. And that's how companies like Cambridge Analytica came and used our phones
Yeah.
to woo voters in our 2013 elections.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You talked of cable. Cable
Yes.
grew in America. Most people were on the screens. Most sports were on the screens. What business did this bring in regards to sports business development and
Right.
the avenues that came to life or bloomed to life just from the growth of cable and all that?
Yeah. So, right. And now cable, of course, is old technology and
Yeah.
probably won't ever be used. You know, it's all going to be wireless going forward. But in the United States, the biggest single thing probably that happened, you know, and I think there's been a lot of books written about this, is ESPN. So the ESPN network couldn't have existed 10 years before it started, when nobody had cable and it was all broadcast and they didn't have broadcast rights. There was no such thing. And what cable allowed was channels that were very specific. They did not have to appeal to the entire nation. They could appeal to a very small segment of it. And so this idea of hyper-focused sports only, constant sports news, all of this was started from that time. And it's based upon really it's more the technology than the idea that somebody had. I mean, it was a smart idea. Obviously, the people that founded ESPN were great, but it required the technology base. And it's interesting today. You know, it's not important anymore because we have the internet, we have smartphones. So you can always see the score updated. So this whole thing that ESPN did has been, in a way, like completely taken over by social media and smartphones and the internet. I'm getting score updates. Oh, I want to see highlight clips? Well, I get that in my Twitter feed or on my favorite YouTube channel or whatever. So they had this narrow window. I say narrow, it was, I don't know, 40 years or whatever, but like they had this 30 years, they had this narrow window where they were the only way to get updates quickly, and they were the only way to see like these short clips. So
what's the future of sports business coming into esports?
Oh, so esports are really interesting. Esports have this problem that I would say like baseball and cricket have, which is that they're very interesting, like very interesting if you know what's going on. Now, how do you know what's going on? Either you played or you sat down and tried and studied it and watched it for 2 months straight and watched a Twitch stream, and now you actually can understand what's happening. But esports inherently don't have this. Again, if I have this amazing bicycle kick goal in football, or a really hard hit in American football, or a slam dunk in basketball, like all of those things I understand as a human, those are great. But if some little picture of some guy does something and there's a flash on the screen, I don't automatically understand that's great. I don't automatically understand the same thing in baseball with a pitch. Like, oh, wow, that was an amazing pitch. Like, it's just so hard for people to understand what's actually happening. So that's the biggest challenge for esports, because they do require knowledge of the game in order to be interesting to watch. Now, once people acquire that knowledge, they're extremely interesting to watch, and it's really great. And you have situations like in South Korea where lots of people know what's happening, and so it becomes an actual big event. And again, there's two ways you can approach it. You can either have a colossal number of people play your game so that they know what's going on, or you can attempt to make it look interesting enough that everyone can understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I think that second one hasn't really been done yet in esports. Maybe it'll be possible in the future. I don't know. So right now, I would say that's the biggest limitation on esports. It's very difficult for esports because over the years, there's been this tradition of a very high turnover rate in games. So like, I want to play for 2 years, and now there's a new platform, or there's new technology, or there's better graphics, and a new game comes out. As long as that keeps happening, it's going to be very difficult for esports to get anywhere remotely close to regular sports.
Yeah.
Now you have some things like League of Legends, which has been around for, I don't know, how long has League of Legends been around for? More than 10 years, right? So a long time. And so if that continues, right, if they can keep it together for another 30 years, then it actually has a real chance to be kind of at the level of these other things.
So there's no time esports will get to the level of normal, just physical sports.
Well, no. So the way it would be possible is the same way it is for football, which is that if everybody plays and everybody knows, then it will be interesting to watch. So they have to keep expanding. Then they might, if any esport can ever get to that level where for 20 or 30 years a large percentage of the population is playing, absolutely they can get to the level of sports. I don't see that happening. But if that did happen, then I think they could get to the level of.
Okay. So
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So just as we wrap it up, what are some of the if you can just take us through a brief process on how a game is made for a layman?
Okay.
Just a bit of understanding on how a game is created or how a game is. Yeah.
Games are made in a lot of different ways, so there's not one process. So some games, like these AAA titles, are made because you've got a team of, 200 people and $100 million budget in 5 years, and obviously lots of money to burn on it. And those are probably even underestimates for some of the games. And so that's one way. And that's like making a movie, or even more intense than making a movie. That is a long, involved process. You need multiple layers of executives. You need people in management, and it's. And most people have a very tiny job in that process. So a lot of the games that you've heard of work that way. But at the same time, you have some games that there might be one programmer, or maybe a programmer and artist, or two programmers, and they're just working in their spare time in their garage, and they make a game, and this actually also it's very similar even with board games, where a lot of people could just make it on their own, and then they'll sell it like on Kickstarter or something like that. And so there's this huge variation in how games are made, and so you would need to ask one specific question. But for the smaller games, which I think is maybe more relevant to your audience. You make the game, you program it, you attempt to get better and better graphics before you release it, and they're never going to be anything like the big games, but you just have to hit this minimum bar for your fans. And I think the number one thing for those games is just playing it with friends and working on it and just changing it a little until it's ready for release. And I would say for those, it's not really a job. It's more of a hobby. So do it in your spare time. Have a real job, like you're a programmer, and then in your spare time, do that.
Okay. So there are huge investments and budgets. What's the business in esports like?
What's the business in esports? I don't think that there's any games that have had esports that predate the development and popularity of the game. The game kind of has to become popular first, and then there's a reason to do esports.
Okay.
And I would say, I think it's for exactly this reason that I was saying before, is that until you have a lot of people playing, it's very hard to get interest in it.
Yeah.
And a lot of sponsorship that comes from the outside comes from the fact that you already have a player base.
Yeah.
So if you're StarCraft or if you're League of Legends, once you have a lot of players, then that's what fuels the esports.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to just plunk the esport, create the esport out of nothing. And now more and more, Twitch is so important for all these games. Social media in general, but I think like Twitch is very critical because it allows people to learn the game without playing the game. And it's easy to watch, it's familiar. And so a lot of people, their first introduction to the game, maybe they watch a Twitch stream. There's so many games that people start not because they like the game, but because they like the streamer, because he's a funny guy, they've seen him on other games, and then now he tells you about the game and he introduces the game to you. So then eventually, then you watch a couple more streams about that game, and then maybe you want to go play it.
Okay.
So it is, it's this helping hand of like this way around of forcing you to learn the game before you ever, know what's going on.
Yeah. Viewers, as we get into the quick fire segment, your best sports documentary? Just a name?
My favorite sports documentary. Oh my gosh.
Don't overthink, just say it.
Maybe I love almost any documentary about Muhammad Ali. I think maybe When We Were Kings is maybe that's the name of the right one, about the fight that he had with George Foreman here in Africa.
Okay.
I think I got the name right. Anyway, that's amazing.
If you ever do sports, into the second one, if you ever do sports recovery, your best sports recovery equipment or way of recovery when you were playing?
When I was playing,
yes.
I would just ice.
Deep entire body or?
Mostly my knees.
Okay.
I would ice my knees, and then even though it turned out to be really bad for me, really bad, I would take things like ibuprofen and stuff. So
okay. And the last one,
which I don't recommend that if you can avoid it. If you can avoid it, and you may not be able to, but if you can avoid it, I wouldn't. I would do that as little as possible. Icing is much better.
On to the last one, your best sports athlete in the world.
Best sports athlete in the world.
Boom, quick fire.
Quick fire.
Yes.
And I hate to say it. He's not my favorite, but I think LeBron is probably the best.
LeBron James.
Yeah, I'm forced to. Yeah, he's probably the best.
Okay.
Maybe not anymore. Maybe like right now today, but the best one that's still playing. Yeah, probably
LeBron James. Thank you, viewers. It was a great time having you, Skaff. And until next time, viewers, stay tuned. We have great things coming along. There's a great sports documentary coming. Stay tuned in the month of October 1st. But before we cut it.
Yeah, I got to say my favorite one is Joel Embiid. Yeah, because I'm a 76ers fan. And I need to say that. It's very important that I say who my favorite one is. Yeah.
Yeah. Joel Embiid. We need to visit Cameroon soon and see his roots. Anyways, viewers, it was great having you. Until next time, it's Jermaine, your host, Wima Sports, and Osoita Lodge, where indeed guests become family. Until next time, salute.